Her body was perfect in every line, her face clear and angelic, and her blue eyes, the happiest, the most innocent eyes one can imagine. And yet, Irma Greze was the most depraved, cruel, imaginative pervert I ever came across.
World War II is the source of countless stories about people who became famous for various reasons. The majority of these may have involved men, but there were also women who achieved great fame. Among them, a young German woman stood out, who became synonymous with horror and sadism. But how did a timid and calm girl come to be known in history as the Hyena of Auschwitz? Irma Greze was born in Rechen, Mecklenburg on October 7, 1923. She was the third of 5 children of Alfred and Berta Greze, who worked on a farm. The family received a major blow in 1936, when Berta discovered her husband's infidelity with the daughter of a local tavern owner. Because of the grief and shame she felt, Berta committed suicide by consuming hydrochloric acid. The event destroyed Irma's psychology, as well as her relationship with her father, who remarried 3 years later. According to her sister, Helena, Irma was a shy child who was often bullied and unable to stand up for herself, conditions that affected her later career. As a teenager, she wished to join the League of German Girls, an offshoot of the Hitler Youth, as she believed she would find the protection and companionship she sought. The father did not agree with this, although he himself joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party in 1937. In 1938, at the age of 15, Irma left school and worked on a farm, while the following year she moved to Hohenlohe to train as a nurse at an SS medical center. The unit was headed by the best-known orthopedic surgeon of the time, Karl Gebhardt, one of the first members of the Nazi Party and a personal friend of Hitler. Gebhardt, along with Dr. Herta Oberhauser, the only woman convicted of crimes against humanity at the doctor's trial, conducted experiments, treating infected wounds with sulfonamides and bone grafts. They inflicted wounds on female prisoners and infected them with bacteria, to then observe the effect of using sulfonamides on them. The goal was to create a battlefield wound care drug for the benefit of the German army. 24 young Polish women were used in these experiments. At the same time, they dealt with the regeneration of bones, muscles and nerve fibers, as well as transplants in 86 female prisoners, 74 of whom were Polish political prisoners. Watching these sick experiments was Irma's first exposure to horror and sadism. Additionally, there is the possibility that her subsequent sexual activity and perversion began with Gebhardt. After all, it wouldn't be difficult for young Irma to be charmed by a man of the famous doctor's social status and reputation. The only thing certain was that Irma was fully nurtured in the racial ideology and worldview of the SS. But, despite her efforts, Irma did not have the skills to become a regular nurse. Gebhardt suggested that she try another career, and, in April 1941, he found her a job through his acquaintances at the notorious Ravensbrück concentration camp, which housed all female inmates. Soon, Irma began her training as a prison guard, on the one hand for better pay, amounting to 54 marks a month, and on the other hand for the power and authority she had never tasted before in her life. Initially, she worked in support positions, as she was still a minor. In the summer of 1942 she began a 3-week hard training. According to testimony, in the first days, Irma apologized to a prisoner when she crossed her path. It took a few days of training to cure her kindness and humanity. An important role in this was played by Theodora Binz, one of the high-ranking women of the camp, who personally trained Irma and taught her sadistic practices. The female guards were not regular members of the SS but a subordinate workforce. To join them, the candidate had to pass medical tests, have a clean criminal record and pass written tests, where she answered questions such as, "What is the abbreviation of SS?" and "Where did Hitler write Mein Kampf?" After successfully completing the training, Irma assumed her duties. Following the example of her colleagues, Irma began to have sexual relations with male SS officers, which was common and acceptable. On the contrary, sexual relations between SS and prisoners were strictly forbidden. In March 1943, she was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau and placed in the women's concentration camp, where the extermination in gas chambers and the cremation of the victims took place. Her other responsibilities included managing a gardening team, call center, and mail censorship. In May 1944, Irma was promoted to Oberoffizierin, the second highest office a woman in the SS could achieve, and had absolute authority over the camp's 30,000 women. She became notorious in this role, and many survivors singled her out from her 3 favorite items that she always carried with her. These were her heavy boots, with which she furiously kicked her victims, her whip, and her pistol. Aside from her sadistic methods, Irma also stood out for her natural beauty. Her prisoners called her the Beautiful Beast, the Blonde Angel, and the Hell's Angel. She had naturally blonde hair, blue eyes, and wore well-tailored uniforms. She loved rare and expensive perfumes, which she wore in large quantities to mock the prisoners, who lived in squalid conditions. Thanks to the looting of the victims' belongings, Irma had at her disposal excellent clothing from all over Europe. She used a prisoner, a former owner of a well-known clothing store, as her personal dressmaker, who made the clothes she requested. She spent hours in the mirror taking care of her hair as well. She fancied herself as an actress and once declared,
"After the war, I am going to be in films. You will see my name as a star on the screen. I know life and I have seen many things. I feel my experiences will be useful in my career as an artist."
One of her favorite punishments was whipping the breasts of women who dared to disobey her orders. Many of them got wound infections, and Irma sent them for surgery with an unsterilized knife and zero anesthesia. According to the testimony of Dr. Gisela Pearl, Irma enjoyed the horrible screams of the women during the operation with a sexual paroxysm.
She did this on multiple occasions, so she could relive this sadistic moment repeatedly. She always came to watch the operations of these women whose breasts had been slashed open and had become infected with the lice and dirt which pervaded the women's camp.
Also, Irma used 2 huge dogs as part of her brutal reign. If some unfortunate prisoner collapsed from exhaustion and was unable to carry out her commands, she ordered her dogs to attack her, while she stood over them and enjoyed the spectacle in ecstasy. Irma was also famous for her sexual perversions, having male and female lovers, regardless of position. It is alleged that she had relations with the commandant of the camp, Joseph Kramer, as well as the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele. Her relationship with Mengele ended when he found out that she had relationships with female prisoners as well, since homosexuality and relationships with prisoners were expressly forbidden. On one occasion, Irma dragged and whipped a naked woman in front of her Georgian lover, because he refused to give in to her desires. After that, she executed the man and sent the girl to the camp's brothel. During her sexual estrus, Irma became pregnant. Then, she ordered the imprisoned Dr. Gisela Pearl to perform an abortion in secret, as this was strictly prohibited by the Nazi state. Pearl performed the operation in utmost secrecy, as it was the only way to avoid being executed. It is said that Irma truly loved an SS man, Sergeant Franz Wolfgang Hatzinger, chief engineer at Auschwitz. She usually met him in the evenings, while she bragged about her deeds and the power she had in her kingdom, as she called the camp. Irma's reign of terror in the camp ended in January 1945, as the Red Army entered Poland and approached Auschwitz. Irma was temporarily moved to Ravensbrück and, in March 1945, was settled in the Bergen-Belsen camp, where the food, housing, and sanitary conditions were appalling. Bergen-Belsen was the reception center for prisoners from concentration camps that were closed due to the Soviet advance in Poland. Joseph Kramer, former commandant of Auschwitz, took over the command of the camp. The change did not deter Irma, whose cruelty became even worse. Among other things, she made prisoners hold heavy stones over their heads during long roll calls, while forcing them to stand for hours in snow, ice, and rain from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. If someone did not stand up, she would beat her with a rubber stick, until he lost consciousness. On another occasion, he threw potato peel scraps by the camp kitchen, and waited to catch someone so hungry that he would try and dare to eat them. When two sisters fell into her trap, Irma grabbed their heads and smashed them together. Although she only worked in the camp for 3.5 weeks, she was so tough that the inmates nicknamed her the Beast of Belsen. The end of her sadistic action came on April 15, 1945, when the British 11th Armoured Division arrived at the camp. Initially, the British tasked the women with burying the 10,000 corpses lying around the camp. 2 days later, Irma was arrested and interrogated by British lawyers, who arrived in Belsen to collect evidence and statements about the events that unfolded there. When asked why she had committed such crimes, she replied,
"It was our duty to exterminate antisocial elements, so that Germany's future is secured."
On June 16, 1945, Irma, Commandant Joseph Kramer, and 43 other Belsen personnel were charged with murder and ill treatment of prisoners at Belsen and Auschwitz and were taken to cell for pretrial detention. Throughout her interrogations, Irma stated that she was convinced that everything that had happened was correct. On September 17, 1945, the British War Crimes Tribunal for Kramer, Irma, and the rest of the camp staff began its work in Lüneburg. The trial was conducted under English law and all defendants were represented by counsel. Major Cranfield had been appointed as Irma Greze's defense attorney. The trial lasted 54 days. Each defendant was given a paper placard with a number to wear during the trial. Irma was number 9. Even during the trial, she attracted the most attention because of her beauty and rumors of her monstrous crimes. She maintained her calm, unrepentant demeanor throughout the trial. Even when films and photographs of the corpses taken after the liberation of the camps were shown, Irma remained impassive and unaffected. Nor did the testimonies of the survivors seem to move her. Instead, she seemed more concerned with her appearance, and is known to always carry a comb with her to style her hair. Her behavior made it all the more difficult for Cranfield to defend her. He managed to deconstruct the testimony of a woman, who had claimed to have seen Irma beating and torturing prisoners. In addition, he brought Irma's younger sister, Helena, to court, who testified about her sister's difficult and traumatic relationship with her father. Then, Irma showed emotion for the first time, by bursting into sobs. On November 17, 1945, Greze, along with several other female colleagues, were found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The condemned appealed to Marshal Bernard Montgomery, but their appeals were rejected on December 8, 1945. 2 days later, they were transferred to Hameln prison for execution. Greze remained unrepentant to the end and continued to behave arrogantly until her execution. Britain's official executioner, Albert Pierpoint, was chosen as the executioner of the Belsen criminals, and flew to Hameln. He would execute the 3 women individually, and then the remaining 10 men in pairs, to speed up the execution process. The night before the executions, Irma and the other 2 condemned prisoners sang Nazi songs until dawn. On the morning of December 13, Irma Greze was the second woman to be executed. Awaiting her end, Irma called out to her executioner, Schnell, meaning she wanted to be quick. At 10:03, Greze was dead. After 20 minutes, the bodies were moved and buried in the Hameln prison yard. In 1954, her body was reburied in the A.M. Well Cemetery near the prison. Aged just 22, Irma Greze was the youngest Nazi war criminal to be hanged, and also, the youngest ever hanged by the British in the 20th century.